Okay, we'd like to welcome you to our Founders Forum tonight. My name is Merlin Hafen. I'm with the Virgin Valley Historical Society. I'll introduce some of the members of the society that are here. We have Geraldine Zarate, Darlene Reese, Claudia Levitt, Sam Reber, Ryan Toon, Gail Frainer, Melvin Peterson, and Pat Schoppmann. And we'll be hearing more from Melvin and Pat here in a minute. We'd like to thank the City of Mesquite for sponsoring this. Also Aaron Baker for being here and running the camera. We'd like to thank Reliance Connects and Baja for broadcasting this tonight. We do have some upcoming events we would like to mention. We will have a bake-off the week before Mesquite Days. It's on a Wednesday, I believe. Get your recipes out for lemons, and we will have that event over at the Arts Center. There will also be a forum that week. We don't know who yet, but if anybody would like to volunteer, we'd have you call Gail Frainer. We have tours during the Mesquite Days event of the historical places downtown. So be looking for those. They will be posted with the other Mesquite Days events. Tonight we have Melvin Peterson. He will be our moderator, and they will be talking about the Littlefield School, and we will have them introduce themselves here in just a second. So enjoy, and thank you for watching.
Hi, my name is Mel Peterson. I'm the treasurer for the Virgin Valley Historical Society. I'm kind of new at this, so would the panel, would you introduce yourselves, please?
My name is Patricia Schoppmann, and I'm from Beaver Dam, Arizona, and a trustee on the Virgin Valley Historical Society.
I am Dan Reber. I live in Littlefield, Arizona.
And I'm Christy Lindberg, and I live in Littlefield, Arizona, and I teach at Virgin Valley High School.
All right, you ready to go? Have you got your answers all ready to go? Pat, this first one will be for you. When was the Littlefield School built in the first place, and how did we get the land? How did that all happen?
There's been 3 schools built in Littlefield. One was in 1894 that was like a rock house, it said in the information I was reading, and then 1909, it was the beginning of the one. They said they think it was Rob Reber's old house, and then 1924 is the one that's built up on the hill. And the land was, they were on my grandfather, Joseph Hiram Reber's property in 1924 when it was erected, but it wasn't sold to the school district until November of 1936, and he sold it to them for $100.
He didn't know that once the building was on there, it was worth more money, did he? All right. Dan, can you tell us a little bit about where the school was before? She just kind of mentioned some of those, but where was it prior to the place it's at now?
Yes, just to the south of the schoolhouse now, there's a little home there that Rob Reber bought from the school district and added on to the original schoolhouse. And it was just interesting, just a short time ago, Ron Scroll owns it now, and I happened to be up talking to him, and he took me inside, and you can actually see, he's doing some remodeling, and you can see the old original one-room schoolhouse. It has the real thick walls around. I think they use it as the living room now, but it has the real thick walls all the way around that living room, and has windows that just go into other rooms. So that was the original room with the windows then went outside.
Thank you. In the early days, when this building was first built in 1924, what all did they use that building for, Dan?
Well, it was the only public building in the area then. So they used it. They used it as the church. Used it as the church until 1952 when they closed the ward down and the Littlefield ward started to come to Mesquite. So it was used for the school and any community or public meetings was held in that building.
Okay, thank you. I can remember the sacrament table. I think it was kind of on wheels, and they could wheel it back into the back room and then bring it back out on Sunday. And anyway, Christiane, how many members of your family went to that school?
Well, my dad went to the school as well as his brothers and sisters. I attended that school building, my brother, and several of our cousins.
Dan, how about you? Same question.
Well, I was thinking I had my grandfather's family by his second wife. His first wife passed away. His second wife, there was 8 children, and all 8 of them went there. So I had 8 uncles and aunts go there. Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
Philip, did you attend school in that? So that's what I was thinking. I'm not sure, but all of my uncles and aunts from there attended that, which was 8, and then of course myself, my brothers and sisters. There were 6 of us, and then 2 of my children attended that school.
Pat, I don't think you attended that school, but I think your mother did. Will you tell us a little bit about your family that went there?
My grandma and grandpa Reber had 12 children, and all 12 attended that school. My mother went through the 8th grade and then came to Mesquite to high school. And I think most of them did. Harold only went to the 7th grade. But there was 12 of them.
Okay, just so that the audience might know, my brother Ken brought a bunch of pictures that are up here on the whatever that is. But there's some really interesting pictures. Demern Reber is in there. Noma Reber, Noma Houston is in there. Philip is in there. Lee Reber, Ken. All of these guys that I knew as a kid, and so maybe Ken, do you want to talk a little bit about some of those?
Yes, he does.
When we were growing up there and going to school in Littlefield, my mom was a real shutterbug. She always had her camera with her, no matter where she went. I asked my dad one time, I said, "That drive you crazy, all the bill you had to pay for all that film she took?" And he said, "Well, when she was doing it did, but I'm sure glad she did it because the pictures are wonderful." But wherever she went, and every year she'd go up, and if you notice the pictures from the first teacher that I have here is Miss Whalen, I think was her name, wasn't it, Philip? I'm not sure, because I didn't have her at all. Beg your pardon? Yeah, 1st grade. And so I started with Mabel Mitchell was my first teacher there, and she just taught the 1st grade. I was only there 1 year, 1st grade, and then they had a teacher come in with was Ethel Lane, and she. Oh, I'm sorry, and then Ethel Lane. She went there from the 2nd through the 7th grade, and then I had a man teacher came down from Santa Clara. His name was Creighton Levitt. Come down and taught the 8th grade. And so if you notice these pictures up here, from the very first ones, Mrs. Whalen up through Creighton they're almost all posed the same. She'd have the kids stand just pretty much the same every year, and she'd go up there every year and take the pictures of things. So we have a lot of pictures here. We have. I have a picture here of Mabel Mitchell. I don't know how many know her, but she's in St. George. She's 94. I see 4 there. She's in good health. I keep stopping in there at the. It's at the Sterling. Yeah, and I keep stopping in there trying to see her, and she's always gone with her daughter somewhere, so she's hard to catch there. But I have some pictures here of me and my brother with her, and I have pictures of Ethel Lane with some of the students that went there, and some of the pictures have the whole school in it. There's about 6 or 8 probably in the whole school. Like this one here,
Ken,
I don't know.
Ken,
Yes.
give him the picture so they can put it on the camera while you're telling about it.
Oh, I see. Oh, I see. I think, I'm not positive for sure because I can't remember, but Doris Reber taught did she teach 1 year or 2 year, Philip, do you remember? That was before you, okay. I think she followed Mrs. Whalen, and then Whalen left and she stayed and she took over. Oh. Okay. I wasn't sure about that. And then I have some pictures here of, and they're posed about the same when Desi Reber was the teacher up there, and it's got, I mean, the whole school was mainly her family. She had 3 or 4 of them there from her family, and then Melvin and Mervyn and Scott, and that was Brent and Brenda Reber. It was cousins or uncles, I guess. And then and more pictures of, this one here is of Ethel Lane and me and my brother. And then we have a picture here. There's some of them, it has Gladys Reber in it. I don't know if you remember Gladys Reber, but she's in some of these pictures. And Jay Reber, he still lives there in Littlefield. He's kind of a hermit. You don't see him too much out and around, but he's, I go visit him quite a bit. He's fun to talk to still, and he's pretty sharp. He knows what's going on. I'm not sure where Mabel lived. She lived in Beaver Dam when she taught there. I'm not sure where she lived, but she was on the McKnight farm with her folks. Yeah, I think Jack did, or Andrew. Yeah. I'll have to tell you a story, though. Mabel Mitchell was the only one. She came in, and some kids was causing a problem, and it wasn't me. But she blamed me, and I couldn't convince her it wasn't, so she had me go stand in the corner. And I remember how humiliating that was. So I didn't ever want to do that again. Even though I didn't do it, I didn't want to do it again. But she was a great teacher. I remember her well, because being my first teacher, and I really liked her a lot, even though she made me stand in the corner. I don't know what else. They're just pictures of Ethel Lane and some of the folks that went there. So,
do you have the picture of DeMurin and
I have this.
Norma?
I have this picture of DeMurin Reber. I seen him, and I had this picture, and I seen him, and I said, DeMurin, I have a couple of pictures of you, and he says, no, you don't. There was never any pictures taken of me when I was a kid. And I says, well, I'm sorry to tell you this, but I have at least 2, maybe 3. And so I invited him, and I told Norma that I had, his sister, that I had some pictures of her that she didn't know existed either. And so I invited him up and showed him the pictures, and then I copied them off for him so they could take them and make them and turn them in. So I think he's in 2 or 3 pictures here. He has a hat on. He's a pretty good looking guy. So that's about all I have.
Thank you very much. Christiane, can you tell us what a normal day was like at school?
Sure. I don't remember specifically like what we did or when. I just remember for most of my education there, my grandma was my teacher, and I had a bad habit of being late. So she would always sing to me as I came in the door about how my tardiness. And I just remember that she always had us busy. I think I started teaching my first class when I was in second or third grade, and Corey was my student. She was in kindergarten, and it was my job to take her in the other room and teach her the alphabet while my gram worked on other subjects. We were all in the same room together, kindergarten through sixth grade, and she had it well organized. She knew what we were doing at all times. And I remember when I was in the younger grades that she would release us early. We only went part of the day. And then she would take the older kids to her house and do home ec, where they would cook and do things like that. And I always wanted to be with the big kids. I didn't think that was very fair. And our window looked out over her house, and I would stare out the window. I want to go cook with Grandma. And I never, by the time I was in the older grades, she was getting ready to retire, and she didn't do that anymore. So I never got to do the fun home ec stuff at Grandma's house. But
Thank you. I went to school with Dan. He and I were the only two in our class, but Dan was the one that liked school the most. So Dan, tell us a little bit about school for you.
Well, Mother taught me three grades: the fifth, sixth, 7th, and 8th. 4 years. See, I didn't learn very well in school. School was interesting because, let me tell you, we had a little car group that once in a while would have somebody new in school, but the one year, I know there were 10 students. I had 2 uncles and an aunt, 2 cousins, and 5 of us were brothers and sisters, and my mother taught the school. The next year we had an increase of 1, and I had 3 cousins, 2 uncles and an aunt, and 5 of us were brothers and sisters, and Mother taught the school. I tell people that we started homeschooling. We just didn't know that. We went to a schoolhouse to do that. But one thing about it, there wasn't a lot of fighting and a lot of squabbling because there was only 3 families, and we had to live together. And so I can never remember any fighting or quarreling during our school, which was interesting to me. It was interesting that Clayton Levitt was there earlier. Clayton Levitt from Santa Clara came back and taught us, I think 2 years. And it was a big thing. He would take us to Santa Clara and let us spend a night at his home during the year. He'd take the girls one time, and then the boys got to go another time and spend the night in his home. And that was a big thing for us, to go to Santa Clara and spend the night in his home. But school was, my mother, when she taught us, always had us busy, and Mother was big on reading. She always had us involved in reading, and she would take a period out of the day and she would read books to us. And so I think all of us developed a joy of reading, which I think has helped us. I always told my mother the problem with me is she didn't teach me long enough in school. My 2 younger brothers or twins, excuse me, and she taught them the first 8 years of their schooling, 9 years. They had kindergarten then, and so they went through kindergarten through the 8th grade, and both of those boys are doctors. So I'd always tell her she just didn't teach me long enough in school to get me straightened out.
Dan, could you tell a story about Keith on his first day of school?
Yes, Keith was excited to go to school, and Mother had always told him he wanted to read, and Mother said, when you come to school, we'll teach you how to read. And so she went to his first day of schooling, and at noon, he disappeared. He didn't come back to school, and so Mother finished out the school and went back home, and there was Keith, and she said, where'd you go? You didn't come back to school. And Keith said, you told me you'd teach me how to read, and you didn't do that, so I didn't go back.
Thank you. He was in a hurry, wasn't he? Christiane, can you tell us what the kids did for lunch at lunchtime, and tell us about the lunchroom?
We didn't have a lunchroom. We just we either went home or we packed a lunch. And it depended on the year whether we wanted to do that, or who was there and who was taking lunches, and a lot of times I had to go home for lunch because it just wasn't very far. And so I would be jealous of the kids that got to stay for lunch and packed a lunch, and then the years that I packed a lunch, I was jealous of the kids that went home for lunch. So yeah, I was just never happy.
Thank you. I look back on that and I thought it was really interesting. We all went home for lunch, and then Desi, of course, she went home for lunch too, and then when she'd go back about 10 minutes ahead of time, and about 5 minutes before school, she'd start ringing the bell. So we knew we had about 5 minutes to get back to school, so we were hot-footing it to get back up to school. So I still remember that bell, and when we'd go out to recess, she had a little handbell, and when it was time to come in, she would ring that handbell. Dan, can you tell us a little bit about recess? Tell us about all the athletic equipment and everything we had?
I remember one of the big things was we did have some baseball bats, softball bats, and some mittens. And we did have a baseball field. They had gone in with, I'll bet, animal horse-drawn equipment and leveled the field, kind of leveled. It was level this way. It was quite steep. I remember you'd run downhill to first base, uphill to second, uphill to third, and downhill to home. You could get home in a hurry. While we were in school, they did put a concrete pad out beside the building, which was probably 50 feet by maybe 60 or 70 feet, and we put up 2 basketball standards, and that was our basketball cart and a roller blade cart. We all had skates, and we could really skate. You'd never skated anywhere straight. You was always in a turn, but we thought we were good skaters.
Thinking about that, I remember basketball. Brent and Brenda were a year behind us, and Brenda was the best basketball player there was. So when we chose teams, we always wanted we chose Brenda first because she was the best basketball player in the school. And then on the west side, there was a big wash. So we spent most of our time playing basketball, running down to the wash to get the ball back, retrieving it to come back up and play ball again. So
I want to tell my story. By the time I got there, that pad was cracked. So our entire skating time was trying to get over the cracks. And there was never enough of us to do a team to play against each other. So she taught us how to play around the world with the basketball, and we played that a lot. She always came out to recess with us. And as a teacher now, I think, good gravy, when did she ever prepare? Because she always had students, and she came out to recess. She went home with us for lunch. I don't know when she ever prepared for her class, but she was always prepared. Oh, and that wash, by the time I got there, it had been filled with these great big rocks. So we always played on the rocks, jumping from one rock to the other, and had great fun with that. And our favorite place to play was up at the top of that slope where the old outhouse was. We took that old wood and built this little fort up there. It was wonderful.
I tell a little story on, when we went to school, our restrooms were 75 to 100 yards away from the school. They were outside restrooms, and so we'd have quite a hike to get to school.
I think there was only one, Dan, wasn't there?
No, there was two.
Was there two?
There was a boys and a girl. My youngest brother Kelly, loved to, well, both of them, Keith and Kelly, loved to get into, my mother loved cherry chocolates, and they were always stealing cherry chocolates from her, and anytime she made candy, she'd try and hide it from them. And Kelly was famous for finding her candy. So one day he found a whole bunch of chocolates that she had made up and hid away, and he just had a feast. He just thought that was the next day. Well, he went to school the next day and realized he was in trouble, and he broke and run for the restroom. And when he come back, his mother was laughing at him, and he couldn't understand that she had laughed that he had to go to the restroom. And pretty soon he realized he's in trouble again, and he broke and run for the restroom. And when she come back again, she was really laughing, and she said, "How was that candy made out of the X-Lax?"
We might have skipped around this a little bit. Christiane, how many students do you think were in school when you were there?
For the most part, when I was in the younger grades, and my grandma was my teacher from kindergarten through the 4th grade. I remember there was generally 4 of us. There was one family that had 3 kids, and then I was there. By the time I was in 2nd and 3rd grade, your kids started to come, so there was 4 or 5. I do remember one year there was 4 of us, and a family moved in with 4 kids, and so they doubled our population in a day. That was an exciting day in Littlefield. We had new friends, all of us. When I was in the older grades, 5th and 6th grade, 6th grade especially, they were redoing the highway through the gorge, and we had 21 or 22 kids, and Liz Dalton was the teacher. And it was K through 6, all of us. And that was the only year I ever had a student in my grade. And my grandma always said I was the smartest kid in my class. I didn't have a lot of competition, apparently.
I remember my dad used to be on the school board, and he was probably with Christine, I don't know, but he told me the story of at some point in time, the school got down to 2 kids. And the county wanted to close the school, and he just refused to do that. And matter of fact, he said what he did is they hurried and signed Desi to the next year, and then the county had to, because she already had a contract, they had to go for another year. So that's kind of the way they kept the school open, is staying one jump ahead of the county. Christiane, tell us about your education. How did it help you?
Well, I think that I had an excellent education, and I look now and I think, man, we really didn't have much. And I tell people all the time, most of my materials that I was taught from, my grandma got out of the dumpster from Clark County School District. It was the stuff everybody else was throwing away. And I think I'm probably the youngest person in the world that learned to read with the Dick and Jane books, because that's what we had. Most of the materials we used, she bought, or like I said, got out of the garbage. And I remember when I was in the 6th grade, the next year I would be coming down here to school, I was very concerned that I wasn't up to what the kids in Mesquite were learning. So my teacher, Miss Dalton, came down and actually borrowed one of the math books from the class down here, and she brought it back, and she would call every couple weeks the 6th grade teachers in Mesquite and say, okay, where are you at? She's really concerned she's not going to be in the right spot. And my biggest concern when I did come down here, for me, Virgin Valley was huge. And I think back now, and it was, you know, my first teaching experience, there were more kids in the band than we had in the high school here. So but coming from a school of 5 or 6 or even 20 kids, having 180 in a school was just huge. So that was a bigger shock to me than actually the academics. And I've never struggled with the academic part. Like my dad said, my grandma was really big on reading. Her goal for me by the time I left school was to read every book in the library. I probably did that. Granted, there were probably only 300 books in that library, but I read every single one of them. And she made sure that those books were my friends. You know, when I was growing up, there weren't a lot of kids in Littlefields. You know, when you only have 6 or 7 kids in the whole school, there's not a lot of kids to be hanging out with. So I spent a lot of time reading. And she also taught me that there was a big world out there, and my best way to see that world was to be reading books about different places, and that it was possible that someday I could travel and I could see those places for myself.
Okay, thank you. Dan, can you tell me when the school there in Littlefield closed and they moved over to Beaver Dam to the big school?
Yes, I did a little bit of research because I couldn't remember exactly when. But I work for the power company up there, and we hooked up the power to the building in August of '99. And as I remember right, they didn't start the year over there. They moved from Littlefield to Beaver Dam's mid-year of '99.
Okay, thank you. We've got a few more questions for Pat. We've kind of left her out of this so far, but we're going to get back to her. But I was wondering if, before we do that, if anybody has any questions they'd like to.
Record of how many kids actually went to school there up until they moved it over to Beaver Dams in '99 or whenever it was. Anybody have any record?
I'll bet you could go back and find that, but I have no idea.
I think that the superintendent out there has been looking for those records, and I think they've been pretty difficult to find. There are some years missing. We have some of the roll books from my grandma's that my grandma kept, but it's not consistent. And so yeah, it would be really interesting. I would love to see who all was there. Yeah. I know when I was in 6th grade, I wrote down in my journal every kid that was at school there, just because to me that was the year it was so huge.
Another question I have would be, the people that graduated from there went on to be professional people, a lot of them doctors, lawyers, school superintendents, and teachers. It'd kind of be interesting to how that group that went there through those years, what some of the professions were, and who made that. You know, who become what. That's the only question I have.
That'd be interesting to know, but I'm not sure that we can know that right now. But it'd be interesting to kind of start writing things down.
I want to ask about the building. I used to go up there with my dad when Desi would call about replacing some of the lights, but wasn't there a stage? And I mean, who was your audience? What programs did you put on?
Oh, we put on a program every year. At Christmas time, we had a program. At the end of the year, we had a program. Grandma loved to dance, and she taught us all to dance. We would have dance programs. For the most part, that big room with the stage, we didn't use that a lot as a classroom until that last year I was there when it was, 20 kids. For the most part, we used one of the 2 side rooms, but we did have a lot of programs in that
when he said about the school records, it'd be interesting to find. A couple of years ago, and my husband was on jury duty, Melvin had told me that they had some records down at Kingman, so I went searching for these records while my husband was on jury duty. And I was told they were passed over to the new museum, and so I went there, and they searched everywhere for some of these records. And they finally, one man finally told me, he said, I think we threw them away because the state didn't want them either. He said, they were hauled away. And I said, why? And he said, we had to make room for some things from here. Sometimes I don't like Kingman. You know, I really don't. But also, what about the people beforehand? Like when you said you was going to go down to Virgin Valley. Imagine, I just can't imagine what that would be like in the earlier days, like when my mom and Bernice and everybody else's mom and dad, you know, went down. That's, you have to go, leave your home and go boarding, didn't they? I mean, they have to live with somebody all week or all month or something like that, didn't they?
Mother lived with Neil and Jack Carty and worked at the service station, milk cows.
That would be terribly hard.
In our day, we drove every day. We would drive to Mesquite to the mobile service station and pick up the bus and go to Bunkerville. And we don't have to wait for after school sports and all that stuff. Come home.
We drove also. How old were you when you started driving to school, Melvin?
10.
No, that was on the farm. But I think as freshmen, we started driving back and forth to school. Of course, we had drove on the farm for several years, so we knew how to drive, but it was a different world. Another thing that was interesting to me is we talked about the education, and I remember also that while we were in school, we always were involved teaching the younger students, helping with their lessons. And I think it gave us, even though there wasn't very many of us, it gave us, you know, the opportunity to associate with other students. And when we went to Mesquite, of course, most of us, we came to Mesquite to church, so we knew most of the kids in our class, but it's been surprising to me how well we did transfer to Mesquite. Philip, were you the student body president or the senior class president?
At Virgin Valley?
Yes.
I was student body president.
Okay, that's what Melvin was student body president.
1954.
Jim was
He was a senior class president.
He was the senior class president. School president. It's interesting to me for such a small corps how many of us, you know, ended up being really active in student government there.
Well, I didn't go to school in Littlefield, but when those Littlefield kids came to our school, they were smart. I'll tell you, the ones that came in our class, Marilyn Reber, Clyde Peterson, smart kids, very, very well taught.
I just can't help but tell a story about Miss Lane. Miss Lane was not married and lived in I think she lived in a mobile home. And every Saturday she would take us to the movies down here at Mesquite. Saturday was the day for us to have our weekly bath and to get dressed up and come to the movies. And the movie would always play a serial movie before they played the main one. So you'd come and see a little part of it, and they'd cut it off, and you'd go see the rest of the movie, and then next week you'd come back and see what happened when they fell off the cliff or whatever.
In my mom's life story, she talks about going to school in Littlefield and how her first grade teacher taught her to sing alto, which she sang all her life, and the second grade teacher taught her to embroidery, and she did beautiful work.
When you were talking about going and spending the night in Santa Clara at your teacher's home, I got to laughing because being a school secretary, do you realize how many permits that was? And even that would have to go through the legal department because you're crossing the state lines, you know? And you guys just did it, huh?
Yeah, when I taught in Vegas, none of the kids ever believed where I came from or the kind of schooling, and I always told them, yeah, my grandma was my teacher until the 5th grade, and it was small, and they all wanted, I want to see that, and there was just no way I was ever going to even begin the paperwork to take any kids to Littlefield.
We'd have had to do paperwork every day going back and forth across the border. But the thing I always tell my kids is I lived in Arizona, I went to school in Nevada, and married a girl from Utah. Actually, I dated a girl from Utah at the same time.
Well, I had a similar thing that I had my senior year. I tore the muscle loose from my knee in football and had to go to St. George to a doctor. And when he looked at my paperwork, he looked at me and he said, are you serious? And I said, what? He said, you live in Arizona, you go to school in Nevada, and you come to Utah to see a doctor.
Okay, Pat, that building up there that was built in 1924, what can we do to save that building?
We're working on that. I'm working with Dr. Robison, and he's trying to get the school to let him know, the school district, if we have to buy it or if they're going to lease it to us. We asked for $1 a year lease, and because of the new legislation in the Arizona state, they won't let us do that. So they're still working on what they want us to do. We've had a structural contractor for restoring old buildings was here on the 2nd of October and said that it would be possible to restore it. On the 9th of November, we had a structural engineer that does restoration work out of Lancaster, California, came and looked at it. And he sent in a plan that we have to put in there's no footings, and that's the first thing we have to do and make sure the walls are safe. At the political meeting last week at the Beaver Dam High School, one of the ladies running for, is it called superintendent facility, the school's facility superintendent for Mojave County, she was on the grant board for historical buildings, and next year there's going to be money for buildings, and she's going to put our paperwork in and see if we can get a grant to help with all this. And the other will be donations from individuals. We do have the articles of incorporation have been drawn up. And that's the first thing we need. We have to have that and the tax-exempt, non-tax-exempt state papers filled out and filed. And then we have bylaws that need to be drawn up. But the first thing we have to know what the school wants us to do. The second is the articles of incorporation, and the third is the non-exempt tax. We want to be a nonprofit organization, and that's third or fourth on the list.
Dan, is it important that we restore that building to keep it going, or what do you think?
To me, it is. It's one of the few buildings that are left. The old buildings, like I say, the original schoolhouse, the Reber house. It's still there, but it's built all around three sides of it. You can't hardly tell the school. But all the old buildings that were there are all gone. The old rock buildings have either gone down in floods or over the years were torn down and replace. So that's one of the few buildings, and that building was important to Littlefield. It was the school, it was the church, it was the community building. Anything done with the community was done in that building.
Pat, can you give us an idea of what kind of money you think? Has anybody given you an idea of to do this project, and if so, how can we do this?
We don't have a figure for it yet because we're going to have to do it in phases. And phase one is the structural engineer wants $4,700. He has to do as-is drawings and the material that the block was made out of, and the foundation has to be put in and make sure the walls are safe. So we figure with the filings, the non-exempt tax form is $400 to file, and I'm not sure on the articles of incorporation for the nonprofit, but I think it's about 150 to 200. So, and then of course to do the footings and things, we're going to have to, and we have to have the plans approved. The county has to approve the drawings that the structural engineer will do.
Do you want me to stand back by the door and just not let anybody out until they pony up some money?
You can even leave your house when you die or something to us.
Okay. Any other questions? I think we've about come to the end of everything we can think about, unless there's something else.
When you mentioned the legislature wouldn't help, or wouldn't go for the dollar, what was it, $1 a year or $1 the cost? What was it? Why?
I wanted $1 a year, but they won't do it. So
what's their reasoning? I mean,
because new legislation was passed in the Arizona legislature that they can't gift it, and that's considered a gift. So what we have to do is he's working, Dr. Robinson is working with the attorneys and this superintendent of school facilities, trying to find out what they want and what we'll have to do. You know, how much they would lease it to, or do we have to buy the building outright?
but I thought you said Mojave County owned the building.
Well, the
So what
school,
does it have to-
I'm sorry, the school district owns
The building?
the building.
So how does the legislature have a right to say whether they can, whether you can lease it or not?
I don't know. We're just still working on,
I'm still working Clark County rules, right?
yeah.
You're still assuming you're in Nevada.
They're a lot easier to work with than Arizona. Arizona does not keep good records. They're very difficult to work with.
And we found, we followed in Moapa Valley. They've redone a couple buildings, and Pat's kind of been working with them, and they were able to do that, get the $1 a year lease, and it wasn't an issue. But Arizona needs money, and one of the ways that they can control that money is to.
Who's the legislature? Who's the person that's telling you they won't do that?
Elaine Goodale and Nancy McLean are our legislators. And Goodale keeps telling me when I ask for information to contact the LDS Church Historical Society. Well, I've already contacted them. They're looking for information. What I understand is that when they built the school at Reber's place, there were 4 men that went in to build it, and it was 2 Frayners brothers, Iverson and Sam Reber, and then the school paid them for holding school there. And we think that's what happened up above to the 1924 schoolhouse, is that Grandpa owned the ground, and we don't know who built it. And the treasurer's office has gone back in her tax records and emailed me today. She has some information for me. We want to see who paid the taxes. Did they form an organization to do this, or did Grandpa do it on his own? I don't know. But somewhere between 1924 and 1936, somebody had to pay them out of Arizona for the kids to go to school there. So it's just kind of little bits and pieces fall in place, but it's not fast. Joseph Hiram Reber, he had a house right across from the school. Philip's father, Afton, was one of his children. Harold was one of his children. Maud, Vonda, Vera, Ellis, Bernice.
Live in that house that Ronnie Scrow has.
That's a different house.
The house that Ronnie Scrow lives in, Grandpa Iverson built.
Right, but
and
that's
he lived in it.
Right, but that's a different house than the school was built.
It's different than the old Littlefield schoolhouse that's erected up above, well, right on Littlefield Lane. Uh-huh.
Oh, there's Ron Scroll owns two homes there, the old Rob Reber home, and the one where Iverson lived in is the one that's partly washed away. And that was the old Prunty house, is what we... No, it's... just north of it, across the driveway.
Okay.
Northwest. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That, back to the school times, that was interesting. Also, the Prunty family moved in there, and I don't know where. They come down this country from up in Elko, Nevada area, and she was the postmistress there for years. And my mother loved to sing, but she wasn't much of a singer. But I can remember when we were in school, she would take us down to the Prunties because they had a piano, and she could play the piano, and she was quite a singer. And that's where we would go and get her singing training. Mother tried, but well, without a piano or anything. Do you remember going down to the Prunties? And
yeah, I do. That's where we learned to sing the old Rugged Cross.
And she never, that tradition never ended. One of the things my grandma taught me most about when I graduated from college and went to be a teacher, she said, if you don't know how to do it, find somebody who does. And when I was in school, there was nobody in Littlefield that she could do that. So I remember we would come, she'd haul us down to Mesquite a couple times a year, and we would sing, or she would come down with a tape recorder and have her friends play the piano into the tape recorder, and that's what we sang off. I remember Leonard Reber, coming up and teaching some of the higher math skills that she wasn't familiar with, but kids needed that instruction. And if she didn't know how to do it, she was going to find somebody who did, and those kids were going to get taught.
Okay. Before we close, I would like to encourage any of you, if you know someone that would like to donate to this cause, would you let them know, please? Or call Pat.
Pat, what's your phone number?
347-5554.
Also, could you give some directions to the school for our viewing audience? In case somebody wants to go out there and see, I know Littlefield's pretty small, but
I don't know north, west, east, or south, so I couldn't.
if you come from Mesquite out the freeway, you just take the Littlefield exit on the old Highway 91. You turn right, and it's only about 200 yards to where the road takes off and drops down into the little town of Littlefield. So you turn left there. And the old schoolhouse, you can tell it's the largest building in Littlefield. It's not very big, but it's the largest building.
Is there still a sign on there, or has that been taken down? The bell?
Over there's a...
Yeah, over the double doors. It's obvious. It's a school. There's a bell tower on top of it, and it's the second building on the right. And there's only one road, so you can't really get lost.
And if they make it to your house, they've gone too far.
That's right.
Thank you very much, and I'll turn the time back over to Merlin. Or
We'd just like to thank you, Melvin, for being the moderator, and Aaron again, and then our panel. If we could give them a round of applause. Thank you.